all three parts are really important, but this one's really about being able to measure how you're doing and to constantly improve. And people who mail a lot and who are in the know that there's both an art and a science to creating effective mail. We're not just creating a thing. There's a kind of an artistic side, and then there's a practical side. So the artistic side of mail is in how creatively we, craft a message, the images we use, the form it takes, the physicality of the sheet, and the creativity of the strategy behind the marketing. But then the scientific side of mail is in, as I mentioned in the previous webinar was about optimal formats and proportions that save money, but it's also about timing, how and when you send it, the frequency in which you make contact, how you can test and improve and track and measure results. So the scientific side of mail is all about kind of what's under the hood. So the people who are getting really the best results are always evaluating and tweaking their approach. They're always testing. They're always monitoring. So first, let's talk about how to plan for mail. And there are several different types of campaigns to think about. And there's something called a one-shot mailing, and those are kind of your one-and-done mailings. And primarily, these are great for things like special events. You're not going to, for example, send a fancy invitation twice, right? You're going to send it once. Great for kind of a one-time sale or something like that. However, oftentimes people who are new to mail send a one-and-done, one-shot mailing because they say, well, I'll give this mail a shot, but let's see how this works. And they'll send one piece and they'll say, well, mail stinks, it doesn't work, I don't know what everybody's talking about, and I'm done. But it's because they're not realizing that mail is a relationship. So there's a reason for one-shot mailings, but you shouldn't use them as part of your kind of regular strategy if your goal is to maintain a relationship with your customers. So then there's something called wave mailings, and these are timed mailings. Let's say you've got a campaign and you've got multiple mail pieces that you're sending them, in waves with time in between those different waves and between those mailings. And so sometimes, if you're going to get kind of smart about it, often you're going to take the customer's response into consideration. So, if they did this, then we send this mail piece. If they didn't, maybe there's two mail pieces, one for people who don't respond and one for people who do or something. Otherwise, you can just keep sending the mail pieces to hit those multiple touch points, and that's okay too. Then there's something called the trigger-based marketing campaigns where a certain action or event on the part of the customer sets off the next marketing tool, such as a homing pigeon. I'm sorry, when I was looking for imagery, I just got such a kick out of the idea of putting a very low-tech idea here. It just cracked me up, but obviously no homing pigeon gets released. But for example, let's say when your customer reaches a certain amount of sales, let's say they've spent a certain amount of money with you, and you say, okay, once they've hit $500, we send this. Oh, you're now our loyal customer, and you now are in this special category, congratulations. Maybe they give you some information, and once they hit send and give you that information, something else gets sent in the mail. So that these are specifically triggered by actions or achievements, per se, on the part of the customer. And then there's something called a drip campaign, and these are great when, a lot of times people think, well, I don't have a sale all the time. Like, I can't keep sending mail about, having a sale or whatever. Drip campaigns are wonderful relationship builders. These are, the mailings, for example, you might send a newsletter with special tips in it or something, just helpful stuff, anything that keeps you top of mind. That's what a drip campaign is all about, and it's a wonderful filler in between your different promotional mailings, and it just helps keep the relationship going. And that's why it's called a drip campaign, like drip, drip, drip. You're just releasing, little bits of information out, and you're keeping, you're just staying on everyone's radar, which is another critical part of mail. And then another thing that I want you to think about is other opportunities besides just like campaigns. There's something called a bounce back, and bounce backs are wonderful. If you ship physical product, a bounce back is a great opportunity. Maybe you've received an order and in it was a piece of mail that said, hey, get 10%, thanks for your order, get 10% off your next one. Or, it's some sort of a piece of mail that rides along with a package that was already going. So those can be great opportunities as well. So, always think about that next opportunity to put that physical piece into the hands of your customers and prospects. And when you get your publication that's coming from AccuZIP, the Track and Measure publication, in there's a whole thread about different ideas for marketing. I'm not going to read all these to you, but I just wanted you to see, again, sometimes it can be hard to sit around a table and come up with ideas for a year of marketing. Gosh, what are we going to put out there? How many excuses do we have to contact people? And, I'll pick out a couple of them just for fun. What I mean by create a holiday is, you can create your own holiday. So let's do it for Fold Factory. Let's say it's, Foldtastic Fridays or, Fold of the Month or something. You can do fun things that you create on your own. You don't have to wait for a big holiday to happen. And sometimes it's more fun to create your own holiday. So, you can do all sorts of things that offer an opportunity to reach out with mail. And then before you plan, and in part of your planning for your campaign, there's some really important questions that you need to ask. For example, what kind of customer are we marketing to? And what I mean by that is there are 4 kinds of customers: prospects, customers, loyal customers, and former customers. And so when you look at that list, you have to think about how you're not going to speak the same language and deliver the same message to all 4 categories of people. You should ideally be creating kind of an array of materials to address all of these different categories because it's important, right? A prospect doesn't know you, but a loyal customer does. So we don't talk to a loyal customer like, hi, we're such and such company and this is what we do. They're like, yes, we know, okay? And you also can't assume a prospect knows what you do. So, think about who you're marketing to. What's the goal of the mailing? Oftentimes we think, well, of course it's sales or something, but there are many other goals that you can have. If it's a drip campaign, it could just be awareness and branding recognition. Sometimes it's, turning prospects into leads or, generating some leads, finding more prospects. It could be goodwill. Maybe you're just sending out a powerful tip or something to help people. And it also could be a wonderful kind of surprise and delight for, customers, giving them a special reward or, something with regard to their loyalty. So, you have to really think about what your goals are for the mailing and then work toward achieving those goals in, how you speak. Whatever it is you're sending to them has to be in line with the goals you're trying to achieve. I also think it's really important to define what success is for a mailing. It's easy beforehand to kind of say, well, as long as we sell some stuff, as long as things, sales go up, or as long as this or that happens, we're good. But, afterwards, sometimes it's success can be a pretty subjective thing. And so, where one might say, well, we got some more sales, another might say, well, I thought we'd get more sales than that, or I thought this would happen and it didn't, so is it a failure or not? I mean, if you define success ahead of time, then nobody can really argue with what happens, and what success means. So it could be hitting a sales target and defining that. It could be a change in behavior. Maybe success is getting fewer people to call into the call line and more people to place orders online. Maybe it's a prospect list and all you want to do is break even because you're just trying to get to know them. You know that it's going to take a few touch points. It could be capture of new information. Maybe you sent people to a microsite and tried to gather more information from your audience that will then be more valuable in time when you're doing, let's say, a targeted mail campaign. That can be a big win. It also could be prospect to customer conversion. That can be a big win. So, think about what success means in every mailing and define that clearly ahead of time so that everybody's on board with what success means. You also have to ask, and this is a pretty important question, are we giving ourselves enough time to do this right? Sometimes it's like, oh, geez, we're running behind. We got to get a piece of mail, out. And sometimes in that effort to get something in the mail, big mistakes can be made. For example, wrong indicia, maybe the website's misspelled, or, there's no contact information on there, the obvious stuff. Errors in format and proportion. Let's say you made it outside of letter proportions and now you've got to send it as a flat or something and pay a lot more money. And if you're spending, or it also could be like a new campaign creative without any testing done. And, if you're sending a small mailing, that may not be a big deal, but if you're sending a large campaign, it could be a huge risk to send fresh creative without any testing. So, if you are really up against a wall with regard to time, it can be much safer to go with something that you've already proven as a strategy rather than some untested creative, because it's really a gamble. So now let's talk budget. There are 3 types of cost categories to think about when you're looking at the budget for sending your mail campaign. And, there's always going to be fixed costs, and these are things that aren't affected by your volume, and that's going to be your copywriting, your design, things like photography, stuff like that, whether you print, 100 or 1,000,000, that cost is going to stay the same. Your variable costs, all of us, we're all in the industry, we know that's your list rentals, your postage, your printing costs, your things like that, things that really vary based on the volume of what we're sending. And then there's one-time costs, which are costs that you're going to incur that aren't likely to reoccur. Let's say you did a photo shoot and you had to buy some props and materials for the photo shoot. Okay, you're not going to rebuy those, but those are one-time costs. You're always going to have fixed, variable, and one-time costs. But there are some other costs to consider as well, and oftentimes these things get overlooked. So the cost of testing, and we're going to talk about testing in a few minutes, but there's a cost incurred with running a test, and you're going to want to remember too that the price per piece of producing that test is going to be a little bit higher because tests are smaller, of course, than your actual run of your mailings. But that investment in the test can really have a huge impact on the success of your campaign. Costs associated with a special offer. So let's say you have a special offer and you say we're going to, you'll earn this or earn that or get a free this. Sometimes it's easy to forget that, oh, wait, we've got to pay for the free thing we're giving away, or, we've got some costs that are going to get incurred with, the offer itself. The cost of media to support the mailing. Okay, let's say you're going to send everybody to a microsite, or or do an email blast or whatever. Okay, there's costs to email blast, to designing the email. There's costs, of course, to the creation of the microsite. So just make sure that you're thinking about all those different things that are supporting the mailing. And lastly, the cost of additional support services. So if you're, expecting a nice little surge in calls or whatever, you need to make sure that you've got the people who can take the calls. And so if you have to staff up for, a call center or something, make sure you've got the cost of that worked in. And also just think about that. Make sure that you don't fall flat on customer service. Because one of the worst things you can do is get everybody all revved up, and then they call and they get, they don't get through, or they get poor customer service, or they wait 20 minutes on a line. Don't fall flat there because you didn't plan for the support and customer service. So the next thing to think about is testing. I've already kind of touched on this a little bit along the way, but testing is such a critical part of the process, because otherwise we're really just sending stuff and, saying, oh, that worked, we think, or okay, that didn't work, not sure why, but, So how do you know when you're making the wrong move, and how do you determine when there's magic, right? What's great about something, what made something have greater lift? And it's through testing. And so the way to get started is to create a base. If you don't already have, a baseline mail piece, you want to have a baseline mail piece, which is, consider it your best effort and, your best attempt at your first mail piece. And then you're going to want to make a few variations of that to test, basically. And what comes out of that is what's called the control. And the control is your best performing mail piece. So that's your goal, is to kind of end up with one mail piece that performs well. But what's important to note about the control is you may not like the control. It may not be your favorite piece. It may not be the most creative one. It may not be one that the creative team likes. It may not be the one that the C-suite likes. It doesn't matter. You have, quote unquote, no control over the control. The control is the piece that performs the best. That's all. So you have to establish what that control is. And then that's the piece that becomes your control that you're always going to test against. And your goal is to improve. Your goal is to beat the control, ultimately, is to keep creating better and better and better mail pieces that ultimately beat the control and become the new control. So here's a little example, adding a special offer inside or something, add a variable there that can test against it and try to beat the control. And one thing to note is that you can always test while you're sending a mailing. So you can take a little subset of the mailing and do a test within a mailing. You don't have to test and then wait and let time go by and then put your mailing out. A lot of people test within a mailing or during the mailing. And then you always want to consider if you have a breakthrough, and let's say you have, gosh, whatever you did really moved the needle, is that, if you've got some lists that haven't been performing for you, something like that, you should always consider retesting your new breakthrough to lists, to your other lists or anything that hasn't had, that maybe the control piece didn't do as well on. Previously, if you've had a big breakthrough, consider retesting to other lists. But either way, you should always be testing something and trying to improve. That's what the best marketers are doing at all times. So there are a couple of different ways to test, and the simplest way, and the way that is, I would call it least desirable, but it tends to be only if you're sending small quantities, and that is called sequential testing. And what you're really doing is you're putting your best effort out there, and you're making it, and then seeing how it performs. And then for the next mailing, you make an adjustment, and you see if that adjustment improved the response at all. So here's mailing number 1. Let's say it got a 3% response. Let's say the second mailing that you send, you add the little special offer inside or something. Okay, and then the response, let's say, goes up. So now it's got a 3.8% response. So, and if the response went down, then that might mean that either it didn't have much of an effect or whatever that change wasn't a great change. So, think of it, it's just kind of testing in sequence. And it's really just for if you're mailing, small quantities of mail, and so you don't have a big enough, number of pieces to really get an accurate test. So you're still testing and trying to measure where things are going and trying to improve along the way. The most popular is called A/B or split testing, and that's when you're testing one variable 2 different ways to see which one wins. So here we can test, okay, having a subhead versus not, or having a call out versus not having a call out. You can test, different ways of demonstrating, okay, $5 a month versus $59.99 a year. Same money, just presenting it 2 different ways, and seeing which one gets the better lift. But it's only one variable, because if it's not, then you don't know which one was the one that provided the lift. And then for those of us who are impatient and who don't want to wait for one variable at a time, you can do what's called multivariate testing, and that proves basically which combination of variables can outperform all of the others. So here's a little grid, because the easiest way to explain this is by kind of showing a little grid. And let's say there are, 4 different mail pieces with different variables. So group 1 gets a large card format with headline 1. Group 2 gets large card headline 2. Group 3 gets a number 10 envelope letter mailer with a headline 1. And group 4 gets number 10 envelope with headline 2. So you've got combinations of variables, and that way you can determine which one has the best result. And that's the way to kind of make a lot more progress from mailing to mailing. And there are so many different variables that you can test. I wanted to give everybody some ideas here. And when you get your publication, you're also going to get a list of these as well. So, if you're kind of scrambling to write these down, don't worry about it. But you can test so many different things, from, format to different special print effects on the creative side to, the different ways that you're, pulling your lists and segmenting them. We talked about copy drivers in webinar number 1. Remember, we were talking about that: fear, greed, guilt, anger, exclusivity, salvation, and flattery, so kind of the tone of your copy. You can test copy drivers against each other. You can test, we talked about price and payment terms, which I just mentioned, different calls to action, what ones work better, personalization and where, and even response mechanism. So there are lots and lots of different ways to test and lots of variables that you can test. So lots of options there. But my friend, I have a good friend, Ted Brigg, out of Dallas, and he's an outstanding direct mail strategist. And he always says to me, he says, don't test whispers. And he said so many people, when they test, they think that, they should test, well, I'll put a little pattern in the background, or we're testing, this subhead versus that subhead or something. And the thing is, these are little details, and those little details are never going to move the needle enough. And what you want to be able to do is move the needle enough to be confident in, creating a new control piece. So, if one option beats the control by 0.1% or 0.2, we're not moving the needle enough to say, oh, well, then this is the new control. You have to be able to be confident that your new high performer is really a high performer. So whispers will never move the needle. So don't test tiny little details. Test bigger things. Test size and texture and, bold color and things like that. Test the bigger things. So now let's talk about tracking. Tracking is super important, especially these days, as everybody's got so many different marketing channels that they're using, and everyone's trying to attribute their marketing to the proper channel. We want to know what's working. We want to know all of that. So tracking is really important. So you need to always include at least one tracking method, like a bloodhound. Okay, I went low tech on the homing pigeon. I had to put the bloodhound in. It was just right there. I had to do it. So you always have to have at least one tracking method, and I would recommend at least 2, different ways to track a mailing, because you want to be able to definitively know where all of your leads came from. So there are lots of different ways to track. You can do things that are very low tech. So, low tech, very easy, coupon codes, things like that. Type in this code at checkout or bring this, code with you or whatever. Coupons are great. If you're doing a very small campaign, you could do a dedicated email or phone line. If it's, if it's a bigger campaign, you need to make sure it's a call center with enough people staffed. If it's a small campaign, a single point of contact can work. And also you can ask a simple question. Let's say it's a phone line, how did you hear about us? So even simple things like that can help confirm where your leads come from. And sometimes we just don't ask the obvious question. On the high-tech side, there are things like QR codes, generic URLs, which is kind of just your general microsites that you're pushing everyone to. A personalized URL would be your personalized microsite where everybody gets their own microsite, and then you know exactly who that person is. Google Analytics are great. Just make sure, too, that you check your Google, this sounds obvious, but it's kind of a detail. Make sure you check your Google Analytics before the campaign goes out, and then you can see the effect it has on the campaign. And then also there's great things like marketing automation and all sorts of wonderful tools that help you on the data analytics side now. Those types of things used to be incredibly difficult, and now there's some wonderful, wonderful resources for marketing automation and products out there to help you with that, to get as much data as possible to track where all of your leads are coming from. But with regard to tracking, you should always track the delivery of your mail as well, and you can track it in real time. And this is important because, okay, you send a piece of mail, and how do you really know when it got there? I mean, there's nothing more embarrassing than making a sales call and assuming that they got the mail piece, for example, and saying, well, you know, our mail piece, I'm sure you got our mail piece, and they're like, what mail piece? You know, nothing's more embarrassing than, oops, okay, I guess it didn't arrive. Well, when you get our mail piece, you'll see, right? That's awkward and uncomfortable. So it really helps you improve the planning of your campaign if you know exactly where your mail is at all times. Great for trigger marketing. We talked about those trigger campaigns where once something happens, something else happens. Okay, so once we know that the mail piece hit the mailbox, then, okay, now it's time for the automatic email that happens. And actually, AccuZIP has a product called Living Mail that can actually send messages when the mail piece arrives, and it can send a text or make a phone call. It's pretty fascinating technology. It's called Living Mail. You can also know when payments will arrive, so you can track on the return as well, which is great, because now you know when the check really is in the mail. You can know that orders are coming in. So that's great for timing as well. And then, avoiding those terrible delivery-related disasters. So maybe, you got something in the mail too late and it comes too close to the sale, or after the sale happens, or after the event happens, which is a nightmare. It's the ability to just know and keep track of everything in real time. And then also to accurately calculate your ROI. I mean, you can assume that everything arrived, but if you assume everything arrived, you're counting everything in your numbers. And if you find out that, oh, whoops, okay, some of this stuff didn't get there, well then you're going to get a much more accurate number in your ROI calculations. So all of that really helps. And there's also kind of a peace of mind in knowing that everything actually arrived, especially when you put so much time and effort and planning into a campaign. So this is a product called AccuTrace, and you can track all of your mail from when it's originally scanned and dropped into the mail stream until the mail carrier receives it. So it's giving you all of the data, and you find out exactly when all of your mail pieces arrived. So as you can see in this screenshot, total records 5,000, total scanned 4,824. So you can see, like, okay, here's where everything is, and here's what's left, and here's what hasn't been scanned, and here's what's en route, and here's what's arrived, and here's what's late. So, you can really see, and you can get notifications by text or email when it arrives, and, you can really measure all of your results. So it's pretty powerful technology. And you're going to get a little card in your publication that comes from AccuZIP. It's the track and measure publication that they're sending for everyone who attended. There's a little card that looks like this. It's got a QR code, and you can also see the URL right there if you want to key that in and watch it after my webinar, of course. So anyway, watch for that and check out that video, and you can see how AccuTrace works. But it really is only a fraction of a cent per piece to have that service. So, peace of mind and all the powerful data that you really need, knowing when and where, can really help with your response rates and your success. So it's important. And lastly, let's talk about measurement. So, we always want to be able to measure our success in a campaign. We want to know how we did, and we want to make sure that we can repeat that success or improve upon it every single time. And so I want to talk about response rate versus conversion rate. Your response rate is, what percentage of your audience actually felt, that piece, whatever it was powerful enough to compel them to act. And, the response rate, though, can be deceiving because, just because they responded doesn't mean they're going to buy. So, you could have something gimmicky that provoked people to respond, and that's a great little trick and all, but if it didn't turn into sales, then, okay, you got a response rate, but if the goal is sales, then that may not be what you're looking for. So, you have to kind of look at that as well. So here's the formula. And by the way, in the publications you're getting, there's a bunch of formulas, not just these two that I'm going to show you here. There's pages of formulas for all sorts of different things like customer lifetime value, lift rate, all sorts of break-even rate, things like that. There's all sorts of different things in the publication. So this is, I didn't want to get too deep into math on this webinar, but I wanted to show and talk about response and conversion rate. So it's number of responses divided by number of pieces mailed times 100. That's your response rate. So here's a great example here. So now let's talk about conversion rate. Conversion rate is what percentage of responses actually led to sales. And, you know, as I said, this can be, you know, the conversion rate, if your goal is sales, is really the more important number here. So responses that led to sales divided by total responses for the campaign times 100 is your percentage of conversion. So if you had 125 sales after you received 500 total responses, then you have a 25% conversion rate. But bear in mind that there's really no benchmark for conversion rates in mail. So, you know, you could have, you know, a low response rate but a high conversion rate, or a high response rate and a low conversion rate. But what knowing these numbers can do for you is they can give you some pretty strong clues as to what's right or wrong. You know, as I said, if you've got, if you did kind of a fun gimmick, you know, free such and such, and it's kind of like having a trade show where you give out the best tchotchke, and then you got a whole stream of people coming through just to get your free tchotchke because it's so cool, but they have no interest in knowing anything about your company. So, you know, the same thing can happen with mail, but if that's what happens, you know, high response, low conversion, then maybe that's the issue. Or maybe it's cart abandonment. Maybe there's something wrong with your checkout process. Okay, you got all these people that responded, but nobody seemed to get through to the sale, but you've got all this cart abandonment going on. Well, is it because it was too difficult? Is it because it wasn't, you know, counterintuitive? Did something turn them off right at the end? All of these things are really strong clues that can help you, you know, do better with each mailing. So let's pull this whole thing together, and then hopefully we'll also have a little bit of time for questions as well here. So we had 3 sessions, and I wanted to just remind everybody of some powerful takeaways from each of the 3 sessions. So some of our best takeaways from the Design Great Mail webinar was to think about, you know, who it is you're getting your mail to, who is really your customer, who are you marketing to, and make sure that you have goals for your campaign. We talked about how, you know, the content has to be relevant to the recipient. We talked about the 40-40-20 rule and how audience and offer was the most important thing, and then after that is everything else. So we have to really think hard about that. We also talked about copy drivers and how the written word and the emotion behind it is the most powerful driver of response. We talked about how it's a relationship, and it's hard to establish with mail. It's hard to establish a relationship if we're only doing, right, a one-shot mailing. We have to consider it a relationship and keep it going and stay top of mind. And then we also learned about all the different ways you can leverage technology to, you know, create more and more personalized and relevant content and to really enhance the effectiveness of your campaigns. In webinar number 2, we talked about mail planning and optimization, and you know how powerful mail is, and how we're getting into the hands of nearly 100% of our audience for at least a few seconds. So the opportunity there is like no other marketing channel. So the opportunity is huge, but we've got to get to the right audience with a compelling offer at the right time. So we also talked about the importance of the list, and how important it was to have, you know, a clean list and a strong process there for, you know, making sure we're running our list through the right technologies. And then also talking about proportion and aspect ratio and fold placement and address orientation. Again, all these things are in your publication, but, you know, you're really also trying not to shoot yourself in the foot with unnecessary surcharges before you even hit the mail stream. So, you know, making sure that if you're going to change your, you know, do something big and bold, or, you know, mail as a flat or something and spend more money, that you're doing it by choice, not by accident, right? And then, you know, the carelessness definitely costs you. and that there are tons and tons of different creative ways to work within USPS requirements. So, you know, don't get intimidated or feel limited by the guidelines. Yes, they have just unending guidelines, but there's tremendous creativity that you can do. And then today, mail tracking and measurement. So, you know, we learned about how people who are getting the best results in their mailers are always evaluating, always testing, always trying to improve and adjust their approach. So, you know, you should always be thinking about how to improve and trying to improve your investment every single time and to get better results every time. And, you know, that really our themes, our underlying themes are timing and strategy, the way that we send, right? I mean, a great mail piece sent at the wrong time and arriving after the sale happens is a piece of garbage, right? So timing and strategy and everything else that goes behind it. And you should always be testing, and you should always be tracking and, you know, knowing where your mail is and getting that powerful data that enhances your campaigns, and then also being able to attribute to the channel and make sure that you know where your leads are coming from through tracking. And, you know, lastly, I just want to talk about how whether you spend a lot of money or a little bit of money, you can succeed or fail on either end of the budget spectrum. So always be thinking about those variables and, you know, think about what and where you should be spending the money on your campaigns. Just because you spend a lot of money doesn't mean you're guaranteed a success. And just because you don't have a lot to spend doesn't mean you're guaranteed to fail. It's all about strategy, timing, all these things that we've been talking about, message, offer, and getting into the right hands. But any mail piece can be successful. This is my last little big statement for everybody. Any mail piece can be successful if the timing and execution is good, the offer is compelling, and it lands in the right hands with a clear call to action. And that's the Great Mail Award right there. That's the trophy that you earn when, you know, you keep all these things and take them into consideration and apply them. So that is that. So lastly, just please don't forget, youtube.com/foldfactory. You can get great inspiration every week. Watch 60-second super cool fold of the week. I'm an instructor on lynda.com. I've got courses on mail planning, production for direct mail, and also folding for anybody who's interested. And you can't escape me. I'm everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Find me, follow me, or I'll find you first. So I just want to say thanks. Open it up for any questions. I think we might have a couple of minutes left, I hope. And it appears my internet at the hotel is holding on, so we're going strong, everybody. I survived.
Well, that's terrific, Trish. I'm glad you survived. We survived. Hey, everybody, if you have a question, we have time for questions. Go ahead and type it in the chat box on the right. If it's a question you'd really like to ask verbally, I can unmute people. We got a lot of folks on. I'm not sure I want to mute everybody. Just because of the background noise and stuff, but you know, if it gets that, we can do that. But if you have a question, you just type it into the chat box. And
awesome. And is Kristen on her audio on too? Because they might have a technical question too for if anybody has questions for AccuZIP, it might be a nice opportunity too to ask Kristen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I am here. Excellent presentation,
cool.
Trish.
Thank you. It was fun. It was a really fun series.
I've got a question that came in to me here, and you might get some directly to you, Trish, so look on your right-hand side in case they send directly to you. But I got a question here, and it says, what is a good sample size for a test mailing? So what is a good sample size for a test? You want to do a test?
So I would, here's the thing, and I have asked this question to so many people, and it's very hard to get a straight answer on it. It's definitely, you know, thousands, not hundreds. And the answer is always the more you can test, the better. And so, you know, the number I tend to get is this kind of 5,000-ish quantity that seems to be the lower end of the spectrum. I've certainly seen and heard of tests in smaller numbers, but you have to have a significant enough statistically, significant enough pool to be able to pull from. So I don't know if anybody else who's on the line might also have some experience, or if Kristen, if you guys deal with in some of the lists and things, you know, with regard to testing, but it's very hard to get a direct answer on what the perfect size for a test is.
Yeah, I have a little experience with that too from my consulting days, and I would agree with you, Trish. It's a matter of statistical validity, and you know, certainly the larger the sample size, the better. When you're saying 5,000, maybe to help our audience, are you saying 5,000 like in total, or are you talking about 5,000 in A and 5,000, let's say, in B, so for a total of 10,000 mailing, or just to help everybody understand what you're talking about there?
So it's my understanding that 5,000 in total can at least start to give you some, you know, I guess, predictive results. For example, let's say you're mailing 100, like let's say you're mailing 100,000 pieces. You might want to pull at least, you know, I don't know, 5 to 10,000. They always say the more that you can do, the better your result. So with regard to being able to predict. So, you know, the answer I always get is as many as you're willing to test, kind of, you know, like a decent kind of 5 to 10% of your list size. It's usually a percentage of the list, overall list size. So, but it's kind of a funny thing. It's extremely hard to get a direct answer on that.
Yeah. And sometimes, I got another questionnaire that came in, but last comment, like I had, once again in my consulting days, I had a client that sold very, very expensive yachts. And for them, the success was one yacht. If you had a mailing and they sold one yacht, they were super happy. So they weren't as concerned about percentages. They were, because they were big ticket. Now, smaller ticket. So that's something, too, when you deal with your customer, too.
Exactly. And for them, they probably, you know, knew their client well and could target them. And so they said, well, we're just going to, you know, get to our ideal customer and send them the perfect message. And yeah, if we send one yacht, we've won, you know.
Yeah. Another question here. How many drips in a year minimum for effective drip marketing?
So in general, in general, you should be mailing every 4 to 6 weeks. So, you know, and that's where the drip campaign kind of comes in, you know, is that you can either supplement it. For the drip campaign, it's great to have something that people can look forward to, if it's a monthly newsletter or something like that. But also you can supplement, let's say you have a quarterly, you know, kind of a quarterly publication, and then in between that, you have a few other mailings, a promotion or you know, something else in between. And then the drip campaign is a wonderful little supplement that people look forward to in between your kind of promotional mailings. So I would say on a drip campaign, you know, minimum would maybe be, you know, quarterly. Otherwise, I don't think people connect the dots on it, or would even look forward to that next piece, you know, in the campaign. So I would think in that 4 to 6 weeks, you know, between or, you know, quarterly on a drip campaign supplemented with other promotions in between to kind of keep that, you know, people receiving something from you every 4 to 6 weeks.
Great. I've got a couple last real quick logistical things, but Trish or Kristen, do you have anything that might have been sent directly to you that wasn't in the panel listing in the question? Otherwise, that's all the questions I see.
I don't think I have.
Yeah, I don't have any that were directly to me.
Oh, whoops. Okay, I do have one. Let's see here. And this is from Scott Eganhouse. Hi, Scott. Okay, so you said you mentioned in QA as it relates to the indicia. What's the best way of avoiding rookie mistakes like forgetting to put an indicia on the mail piece? That's a good question. How to avoid the rookie mistake of forgetting to put the indicia on the mail piece. Well, I mean, I would say certainly that I guess a few systems of checks and balances internally, and then also I think unfortunately printers oftentimes have to be that they have to kind of save us from ourselves as well, depending on where you are, you know, within the workflow. You know, I was a designer for many years, and, you know, now I consult and do lots of other things. But when I was a designer, I remember we always saw the printer kind of as our safeguard. Like, well, if the printer didn't tell us anything's wrong with this, then it must be okay. You know, and I think maybe printers need to realize that they're kind of seen that way by designers, like, well, you know, we submit our job and then we lay low and we hope nothing's wrong with it, and we figure we'll get a call from the printer if we did something wrong. So I would say that internally within your organization, you know, if you are in the printing and mail service providing side of things, that you need to realize that we may not realize we made a mistake, or we may be looking to you to find our mistake and save us from ourselves, kind of. And I don't know if, you know, anybody else has anything to weigh in on that too, but oh, yes, and Mike Porter, thanks, Mike, and great point. MDAs, mail piece design analysts at the USPS can also review mail pieces. So that's a great point, and a lot of times I like to have an MDA approve things because, you know, you want to make sure you get that approval in writing that you've done everything correctly. So just as a little safeguard, too.
All right. With that, that's all the questions that I see. And Trish, I'm assuming you don't see anything either.
No, I'm clear.
Good. Just a couple last logistical things. One is a recording of the webinar will be sent out to everybody. So that give me a day or two. So if you don't see it Friday, probably Monday, and you'll get a full recording. If you're a member of Idea Alliance, all the recordings for these webinars and other webinars that we do are in underneath the member, under the member tab, under the what do you call it? I'm drawing blank. Under the download tab for Idea member resources, excuse me. So under member resources, you can get that. Also, you can access information through AccuZIP as well. Maybe Trish or Kristen, if you could once again explain, like if somebody missed the earlier webinars or didn't sign up for the earlier webinars, what they need to do to get, if they want to get a previous publication, just to review that one more time as we'll wrap up our series.
Sure. Kristen, did you want to, or I can also do it? It's totally up to you.
Sure, absolutely. If you are interested in receiving we want to get you all 3 publications. So just give us a call. Our information, you should have it. It's on our website, but you can call our 800 number or shoot a quick email over to sales@accuzip.com and just have a conversation with us, and then we'll be gladly to send you out those 3 publications. So just give us a call. We'll get your contact information, and we'll get you all 3 of them. So you're good to go.
Awesome.
And all of the attendees here will automatically, or anybody who registered for this webinar, will automatically get the track and measure. So if you did miss those other 2, as Steve had mentioned, there are recordings of them. So I'd encourage you to watch them to learn about and get all of the interesting information and informative information that Trish presented. But we'd be happy to send you copies of the hard materials.
All right, good. With that, before I'll give Trish the final word here. I just want to once again thank everybody for attending the webinar, attending the series. It's been a great series. Really learned a lot. So thanks everybody for attending. Once again, I want to thank Kristen and AccuZIP for their sponsorship of this 3-part series. It's something that really helps the industry, and we're very grateful and thankful for their sponsorship. And lastly, I want to thank Trish for such wonderful presentations. You know, I wish she just wasn't so shy and mellow at times. I wish she could have a little excitement every once in a while. But if you can tell, Trish is just fantastic.
I am working on that.
The shy and retiringness. But with that, Trish, thank you so much, and I want to leave you with the last word of our webinar for today. Any last thoughts on tracking membership or the series in general? Some people can go and get that trophy that I never even knew existed that you had on the slide. I didn't know there was such a trophy.
Right? Isn't that exciting?
Yes. Seems a little made up, but okay.
Right. Right. Run with it.
Yes,
well,
but go ahead.
I want to say, it's been a pleasure, everyone. I want to thank Idea Alliance for, hosting this and bringing me on board for this series. It's been a blast. Thanks to Kristen and the team at AccuZIP for, providing my content for everybody and sponsoring. It's been a blast. I hope everyone has learned a ton and has realized that, there are great things we can do with mail if we're strategic. And, that's all I ask is that everybody's strategic. So read those publications cover to cover, enjoy them, And just remember, send mail, it works.
All right. Send mail, it works. We'll end on that. Thanks, everybody, and that concludes our webinar for today. Thanks, and see you along the way, maybe in Santa Monica. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.